So this one guy had crashed his car and was absolutely shit-faced. He was on the hood of the car and preparing to jump off of it. The paramedics told him, of course, not to move, but the idiot jumped anyways. His neck was fractured in the accident already, but when he jumped away, he became an instant quadriplegic. I once had to take a call from a woman whose father had accidentally backed over her 3-year-old son in his truck. The worst part was knowing that there was nothing that could have been done. Obviously, you can't say that to someone. You still have to do everything possible. That means taking her through CPR while she holds pieces of his skull together. He was later pronounced dead at the scene. I was on a cardiac arrest one time and we were using the Lucas device. I was bagging the patient when I looked down. The guy's eyes were open and he was looking up at me. Turns out, if chest compressions are done well enough, like a robot, a body has enough blood flow to do things like open their eyes and move a little bit. It still scared the shit out of me, almost literally. For those of you who don't know, a Lucas device is a machine that can be strapped to a person to do perfect CPR. The person wasn't actually alive, and he won't remember any of it if he ever did recover. He almost moved his hands up to the Lucas, actually. So one of the calls I got was a family of 5 that had burned to death inside of their SUV. They were traveling down the interstate when a vehicle going the opposite direction crossed the median and T-boned them, which in turn smashed them into the car that was on their right side as they were passing. This caused their vehicle to be completely engulfed in flames. No way out except for the back hatch, as their left doors were crushed from the guy who crossed the median and their right side was crushed in from the car that they were trying to pass. The driver, who was the father, died on impact. The mother from smoke inhalation. The mother would have actually likely lived if she was able to get out in time, but she wasn't able to. The oldest daughter and the youngest daughter were both found in the hatch area of the SUV, with the oldest daughter's hand on the release. But before they were able to get out, both daughters died from smoke inhalation. The mother was actually found in a position where she was most likely trying to aid the youngest daughter to the hatch area of the SUV. The son, sitting up front, died from smoke inhalation, but most likely would have died anyways due to the blunt force trauma and burns he received. So this may not be the most screwed up thing I'd ever had to deal with, but it is for sure the most traumatizing thing that I hopefully never have to see again. I was really messed up for a while after that. This family was on their way to the local university to see their son that they hadn't seen in a few months. They were 2 miles from their exit. I volunteered to go to the chaplain and give the notice to the kid. This boy had lost his whole family in a split second. He said that the last thing he said to his mom was, "Don't come down here, Mom, and none of my friends' family ever visit, and you'll just embarrass me." He was devastated. After all these years, I still keep in constant contact with him, and he is practically another son to our family. Folks, your life, or family's life, can be over in a blink of a second. No matter the fight or etc., always let them know that you love them. Hug them, kiss them, embrace them. I've seen it too much. You just never know when that might be the last time you ever see them again. Don't take them for granted. So I'm an EMT here. I brought people back to life, I've dealt with massive traumas, etc., etc. But the most fucked up shit, this is gonna be literal, that I've dealt with was a call to a home of a raging alcoholic. So I show up in my personal vehicle after police and the ambulance are on scene for a dehydrated male. I walk in and see people holding their noses as they walk into the bedroom. I figured they were just exaggerating something until I walked in. The dude hadn't left the bedroom for days. He was just in there drunk. He had shit on the floor, on the bed, and somehow on the walls and the ceiling. there was some shit on the tile of the bathroom that was attached to the bedroom. It had a knife next to it, just like he was trying to chip off the dried up poop. He had pooped his pants and had vomited and pissed all over the place, and including himself. That was the day that I learned to put Vicks VapoRub on my top lip to mask bad odors. In this field, you really learn what alcohol can really do to people, which sucks because you often need to drink at the end of the shift. Fucking poop, man. I used to be an EMT. There was once that we had to resuscitate a guy who'd had a heart attack while getting ready for bed. The only thing was that the walls of his bedroom were covered and covered with pictures of him molesting little children. Shit's fucked up. So we once took a call about two missing children. The parents thought they might have gone swimming in the river nearby. The only thing is, the river had one of those dams with the turbines or whatever. I don't know how they really worked, but yeah, only thing I knew that whatever went in those things was pretty well chopped up. So downstream we start finding bits and pieces of human for a few 100 feet. We had to collect enough to make a decent attempt at verifying the identities. There wasn't really enough left in large enough pieces to get a good idea of what had washed up. It was all pretty pureed. So needless to say, seeing the side of the river strewn with bits and pieces of dead children whose parents had assumed they had just wandered off was pretty bad. So I've worked as a firefighter slash EMT worker for many years now. I've watched a guy shoot himself in the head with a shotgun and paint the ceiling with a very odd shade of crimson. I've hand-delivered several miscarriages from coked-up meth heads. I've had to tell a mother that she couldn't cross the barrier to her family car since both her kids and her husband were dead and mangled inside. Now that I'm retired and looking back, there were way too many stories just like these. I once listened to a woman watch her daughter burn to death in a fire. The fire was too thick to get through in the baby's room. Although the mother kept trying, she kept failing. The baby just burned to death, while her mother stood on the phone with me, screaming and apologizing to her daughter. So I'm going to relay the story from my father, who was a first responder on several bad scenes during his career as a lieutenant and detective in a police force. This happened in the mid-1990s. The first scene involves a 4-year-old boy riding a tricycle low to the ground, it was plastic I think, in the road and on the sidewalk in his neighborhood. The mother was on the porch doing housework, so not too far away. A robbery had just taken place and the police were in hot pursuit of a large Lincoln sedan that was now speeding through the neighborhood at over 60 miles per hour. The police were right behind him. The mother heard engines roaring but couldn't get to the street fast enough. She heard the impact on the tricycle and then saw it. She said that time had slowed down. She saw the bike fly over 150 feet in different pieces and said it was like watching the scene for several minutes. She was just frozen there, watching her son's tricycle in slow motion. She knew he would be dead, but it didn't fully register yet. After seeing the accident, my dad and his partner showed up. They were in an unmarked Crown Victoria, the commander's car. They were trailing the pursuit from a safer speed and distance. Apparently, the kid was on the road, about 80 feet from the Lincoln, which had then swerved and slammed into a tree in the neighbor's yard, killing the robber. A child was in the middle of the road, legs kicking and arms flailing, reaching for his head, which was crushed and flattened on the pavement. His eyes were fluttering and open, blinking and going out of focus. I guess severe nerve damage can do that to a person. He was dead, but his body was still reacting, like a bug. He was basically trying to figure out what happened to his head, and why he was hurt so bad in the last seconds of his life. His brain matter and crushed skull were on the road in bits, and also brain matter found underneath the tires. Aside from the head injury, he didn't have much other trauma. The screaming of the mother shook the body to the core. All of this going on while the child was still moving and convulsing on the street. About a minute afterwards, all the movement stopped. The police officers that were there just stood still. The mother's shrieking was all that could be heard. My father has this image burned into his brain. He is now estranged from my family, and some do believe it was his job that took such a major toll on him. I would have to agree. He tried to share his feelings, but they left him feeling very vulnerable, so he chased everyone out of his life. I haven't talked to him for 10 years, but remember these and other stories he told me very well. My father said that he didn't know why the lives of that robber and the young boy were linked, but they apparently had some sort of karmatic connection to each other. That's the only way he could rationalize this. He had a blank stare and couldn't look at anyone while telling the story. This one really messed him up. I was about 6 years old when this happened, so I guess he put himself in the parents' shoes. I'm his only son. I was an infantryman and unfortunately saw some bad shit stateside while I was in training. A man had beaten his wife to death and then decapitated her with a rusty old knife. He then blew his own brains out with a .300 Magnum. There were pieces of brain and skull all over the room and hairy pieces of scalp hanging off the mirrors. What's worse is that I had to enter that house for 3 whole weeks before the base was finally able to send someone out to clean up the brains and skull fragments stuck in the ceiling. The gore had actually started to ferment and had this sickening sweet smell to it. You'd expect to see things at war, but not back home, especially not during training. Hey guys, it's Gotea here. I know this video was a lot more graphic than my other ones, but I feel that it's important for us to really understand what first responders actually go through on a daily basis. It's horrifying and sickening, and I myself am going to be in that field here after college, and I don't know if I'm excited or just scared out of my mind. Anyways, if any of you have any of your own personal stories you would like for me to share on this channel, please feel free to send them to my personal email linked in the description below, and I'll be sure to include them in one of my future videos. So, thanks so much for listening, and I will see you mates in the next episode.